Hello and welcome to Business Class. My name is Shantanu Prakash, and today we have a very interesting entrepreneur on our show, Kimberly Dixit. She is the co-founder and CEO of the Red Pen. The Red Pen is a global education consulting company that has helped over 5,000 students from all over the world go to the college of their dreams, and now increasingly schools as well. And Kimberly, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Wow, very, very interesting, I would say, a new age business, even though Indian students have been going to colleges outside of India for a very long time. I remember that even at the time when India became independent, some of our political leaders all had education outside of India. I think Jawaharlal Nehru went to boarding schools in UK. But increasingly now I believe that middle-class Indians from smaller towns as well are choosing to go to colleges in the US. So tell us a little bit about this entire trend of Indians looking outward.
Yes. Well, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, India has a long tradition of sort of a very sort of laser focus on education period. And definitely that has been, it has expanded outside of India's borders for a long time. So it's not a new thing by any means, but you're right. I think it's very interesting because in the time that I've been involved with education in India and working with Indian students, I've seen shifts in why people are looking abroad. So that even in such a short time, I've seen shifts. But right now, I feel like a lot of what people are looking for is just trying to address an awareness of the need to have a global exposure. And I think maybe, I don't know, 7, 8 years ago, it was more about, people felt very stressed about not getting good places in Indian colleges. So the push and pull factors just kind of continue to create sort of a space where people need advice and help and support and guidance on how to study abroad.
So Kimberly, it's really interesting because you're one of the few people who came to India for education.
Yes.
You spent some time here learning Hindi.
Yes.
But now your business is helping Indian kids go abroad for education.
Right. Yes.
So tell us a little bit about your own journey. I know you grew up in Central Valley, California, and by some magical means and method, you are now in Mumbai and running a education consulting company.
Yes.
So how did all of this happen?
Yes, it's a long story, which I'll try to shorten for you a little bit. But I was a sort of a typical college student, wanted to study abroad, wanted to get outside of my comfort zone, was looking for some kind of adventure. But I knew that I needed to continue to stay in college. So there wasn't like I could leave college and have that adventure. So I figured out that I could study abroad, and I convinced my parents, and I came to India. And yes, and the majority of the time that I spent was in language study, you're right. But I also studied a lot of culture, history, politics of India at the time. So it kind of got into my system a bit and turned me into, I guess, a bit of an India-phile. So I continued my education in the US, but with a focus on India. So I finally achieved a Ph.D. degree in cultural anthropology with a area focus on South Asia. So I continued Hindi study, continued the study of Indian culture and society. And at the time when I was doing my PhD research in Mumbai is when I met my husband. And he's from India, but had studied in the US. So we sort of had done a switch journey. And then finally, ultimately, after many years, his job brought him back to Mumbai. And so we came here as a family. But so I did know what I was getting myself into.
So how did Red Pen begin? It's not that you had this vision that you wanted to, help Indian kids go to the US or other parts of the world.
Exactly.
So when was the first time that you felt that, there is a need for a business like this?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's an interesting question because I was just telling someone the other day that, I never imagined myself in the business of education. I always imagined I would be teaching or I'd be working in a university or doing research, something academic. I didn't think I would ever be sort of in it for as a business person. So yeah, that never crossed my mind. But once I was in India and I saw, I had so many families and so many people, because I had taught at universities in the US and I had lots of experience, and my co-founder as well, she'd gone to great universities in the US. And people would approach us just informally and ask for our help, or could we read over an application or take a look at an essay. And I think having done that time and again, we saw a pattern of gaps, and what were those gaps and how could they be addressed? And if they were addressed, how would things look different? And so we really felt like, there was an opportunity to fill this need. It wasn't like, okay, there's an opportunity to make a lot of money or anything like that. It was more an opportunity to fill a need. And then we kind of thought, let's see where it goes. It wasn't a plan to like do it forever or turn it into something really large, but it's sort of grown and become extremely, I think, gratifying for us as far as the impact we've been able to make, and also just, I think, a service for the people who need it or want it.
So in some sense, I can sense a sense of mission around what you're doing. And what I found really interesting, Kimberly, was the fact that you're based in Mumbai, but you're providing consulting not just to students in India, but students in different parts of the world.
Right.
And your education counselors are also not all based under a single roof in Mumbai.
Right.
They're in different parts of the world.
Yes.
So in some sense, you're a global multinational, just at a smaller scale.
Yes, at a much smaller scale. True. I mean, that has also been something that I think we really thought big about. We thought, there's no barriers to hiring somebody who lives in Belgium or who lives in Sydney, or, if they have what we're looking for and we feel like they can sort of provide our customers or our the students we work with the service that we want to provide, then there are no barriers. Like why should it matter that they aren't based in the office?
And do you think technology and internet, all of this is sort of helping some of these high-end consulting type of businesses actually have a global presence, and it doesn't matter where you're actually based?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think for all, and I think that's something that, we all know and believe. And I think a lot of people, actually families, do come to us with a bit of skepticism. Like, how are you going to advise or counsel my child from such a distance? But what we often tell them is that even students who are in Mumbai or who we can meet locally, they don't choose to meet us because they're too busy and traffic is a nightmare and nobody wants to leave their house. So even those students we're speaking to on the phone or on Zoom or whatever we do to communicate and exchange information through technology. So it has really worked well for us. And we just sort of, like I said, we never imagined it wouldn't work. So it did.
So in some sense, you're like this accidental entrepreneur. You sort of got into it before you realized you had set up this consulting company, perhaps even without, the typical checklist that entrepreneurs do. They make business plans, they make 10-year projections,
right.
They make pitch decks. I doubt you ever made all of these.
Well, I certainly never did. My co-founder and partner may have. They're little. I mean, everyone has their niche. So, yes, you're right. I mean, I think in many ways it was accidental. And again, I think for me in particular, it was one of those things where I really found it hard to believe that this was something people would want access to, because it's not something that my family ever did or I ever went through. So I couldn't understand the need for it. But now that I've, of course, been doing it for so long, I do see I do feel that, on many levels and in many layers, we are providing a really valuable service. Obviously.
So, when you speak about your business, there is a lot of passion into it. You talk about being meaningful and being relevant to the needs of students. You talk about this whole aspect of human connect and human contact. But that's very atypical of a lot of new age businesses that are coming up today, where it's all about scale. It's all about using all kinds of high tech. It's actually the opposite. It's about saying how little contact should we have. Even the phone should be answered by an automated voice agent or something like that. So you're actually flowing against the tide in some
Right,
sense. And I
right.
find that they're very interesting. So this whole thought process that we should be small, we should be high quality, we should be boutique, is that really coming from your own dreams and aspirations? And did that ever lead to sort of conflicts with your sort of, founding team? And how do you sort of make everybody sort of come together on the same page about this vision of the world where it's all about human beings and relationships and contacts?
Yeah, I mean, I think it all actually, yes, many levels to that question and answers to it. I think first of all, it all does come down to having that journey and experience, and that all, I mean, I could not have said any of this to you 8 years ago, because I would have never imagined I would be sitting here talking about this. But, and after this many years, I understand my strengths in a very relevant way. I mean, we all kind of do strengths and weakness evaluation throughout our lives, but now I can really tell you, because I've had to make hard decisions about, do I want to do X or Y? And you can only make those decisions based on your strengths. So I, after so many years of counseling, knew that was my strength. My strength was connecting with people, with helping them, guiding them step by step. And sometimes it's tedious, and sometimes people can be very demanding. But I could overcome that. That didn't bother me as much. And so that was where I wanted to continue down the path. And when I looked at that versus, building a tech product to try to do the same thing, and the idea of sitting in a room with engineers and telling them and unloading my brain on them, that is not my strength at all. So, there are just times where you're like, okay, I can do that. And I can do that, but I'm never going to do that. So, I mean, having to make those hard decisions, I think, helps you really understand who you are, and also understand the value of what you're bringing, into the engagement. And yes, I mean, we have had lots of conversations about this as a founding team. And eventually, my co-founder did leave, and she moved on to do something in the tech space that's education based. And I think for her, the value of the experience that we, building this business together over the years has really, enabled her to take that forward very quickly, because of all the background kind of knowledge and expertise in the space that she had built over the years. So nothing is ever wasted. You just make a choice and move ahead.
Sure. Kimberly, that's very interesting for me, because I've met a lot of entrepreneurs, especially in the education and edtech space, where it's a hot space right now in India and across the world. And there's a lot of talk about building scale and going to millions of kids. And you're small and you're boutique. In some sense, you're the flag bearer of this whole thought process in entrepreneurship, which says even small can be beautiful, and you need not scale. So do you ever feel sort of envious that you could have done more if you had walked down a different path of raising venture capital money, opening 10 offices around the world? Or are you at peace with the way you've built the business?
It's a good question. And again, I think different people in the organization would have different answers. I think personally, I am very happy and content, but maybe I'm not ambitious, maybe I'm just satisfied, and maybe someone else would have more ambition. But I mean, I don't feel that, I wish I had started this earlier, done it differently, or gone down another path, because I also think there's room for everyone. I actually really honestly think that. I think that there is room for, people who are doing tech-enabled counseling or tech-enabled sort of college education support. And also, what we do. So it's not the case that people don't do both, that students don't do both. I mean, they do. So I think.
So, Kimberly, this whole notion of going abroad for education, of course, it's expensive, right? And it's for a very long time, maybe even now, it's been the domain of the sort of upper class, the elitist class in India. And India is a country that sort of is now beginning to wake up to the fact that, talent is democratically spread, even in the smaller towns and cities. And it should not be a case just because you can afford it. You have all the good education goes to this elite kind of class, and it keeps creating a class divide. So what are your, comments around it? Do you think like the common Indian can also access world best education?
Yes. Yeah, I really do. I think, I think this is another thing that while, talent and skill is available everywhere, it just speaks to the diversity is what I'm trying to say. There is diversity in everything. So there is your sort of top layer cream of the crop kid who also is very much made for the Indian system. And there's your sort of small town, underprivileged, so to speak, child who is just a super creative thinker and would get so much out of a different kind of system. So those kinds of the suitability for different education systems is definitely not based on anything, an already pre-existing divide, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But we've seen so many students, like for example, a few years ago, a student who was identified to us by an NGO as a very sort of ambitious and high achieving and thinking outside the box kind of a student. He was, the son of a mechanic in the military and no means to kind of fund any of his education. And he came to us after being identified by this NGO. We supported him in his application and he was successful in getting a full scholarship to MIT.
Wow, that's
and
fantastic.
He just graduated last year and he,
Wow.
as expected, has made the most of it, has done amazing things and will continue to do amazing things. So you just never know where you're going to find those students. And, we always talk about him, but just to be fair to the others, there have been so many like him. I mean, there were other students, again, with military parents, great education through the KV schools and things like that. And then, just having that ambition and passion to go abroad and getting full scholarships. So we've seen that a lot.
But why don't you help some of these kids stay back in India? India has great colleges as well.
True. I think, both of the boys that I just mentioned, they were both preparing for IIT and they themselves identified that they couldn't, it wasn't for them. That they wouldn't have been happy or successful in that system. So it wasn't like we told them you have to go abroad. They themselves identified that. But just as an example, last year, the younger sibling of one of them came to us last year and she was a little more confused. And I did suggest to her, the Ashokas and Kriyas and Ahmedabad University and the other the other liberal arts universities that are coming up in India, which are very, very strong in terms of the programs they're offering, the curriculum, the faculty, very impressive faculty at these institutions. And the way that they all understand, what a student needs at that age and stage in their development and their sort of, self-awareness and then career discovery is really quite good and quite robust. And I think students can get a lot out of those universities. So yes, that's the right place for many students.
So, I've spoken about this earlier and I've been watching it. Kids from India go to a top US college. 30% or 40% of the professors are Indians. Okay. And they spend like $40,000-$50,000 a year. So what would you advise policymakers in India? Why can't we replicate this experience in India? There was a time, maybe 2,000 years back, when India was sort of the global education hub of the world.
Right.
And so how do you think we should go about in trying to recapture at least a portion of that glory? And maybe even instead of students, attract the professors to come back to India.
Yeah, I think that's, again, my knowledge of all of that is limited enough. But I think that one of the things that I feel, and again, because I have taught in Indian universities briefly, is that, of course, all of this comes down to finances and support, and not having the resources to do these things is the main reason they're not done. It's not because anybody doesn't care or they don't think it's important. So things like faculty professional development, faculty research and publication requirements. So I think keeping your top level faculty of academia active in their field is very, very important. And without financial support, they can't do that. And so at all the best universities in the world, that is built in to the job profile of any faculty member. So it is something that the newer universities are doing. Ashoka, Ahmedabad University, all of them. There's an element of, faculty research hours and things like that, so that the faculty are staying up to date with different sort of developments in their field. But I mean, and it's not to say that Indian faculty aren't doing that, but they aren't supported to do it at the level that probably the universities you're sort of comparing them with in other parts of the world are doing it. So that, to me, I think is probably the most critical aspect. And then beyond that, I mean, there's a shortage. There's a major shortage, right, of higher education institutions in India to meet the needs of the population. So all of that takes a lot of money and a lot of commitment from the government. So I think there does need to be. I think if you're thinking about improving higher education institutions and opportunities, it has to start there.
So what's your vision of Red Pen? You've reached a certain position in life. You're well known, you're well respected. What more?
What more? Gosh, that's a really good question. I guess, I would just really like to see more. I guess if we could do more of something, I think it would be more of reaching maybe a broader spectrum of students in India and families in India. And I don't mean that, they have to be people who are underprivileged or wouldn't otherwise have that resource. But I see so many families who have, who have the means, but they don't understand the value of what it is that they could get for that money. Do you know what I'm saying? So it's sort of like, I wish I could help spread some awareness among people who can actually take that step. Because, I think there's a limit to people's imagination at some level when it comes to education. And if I could sort of open up their understanding of, if you took this step, this would enable the following. Then to more people, then I think that would satisfy me a lot. And I think if I feel like people are internalizing that message and it spreads a little bit, I would feel satisfied. Because I think what happens oftentimes, and I guess this is true in any services business kind of profession, where the sort of counselor in our case is meeting a new family every day. You're just kind of repeating yourself, right? It's like being a doctor. Your cholesterol is high, and this is what that means, and this is what's going to happen to you, and this is the medicine you should take. So we kind of just keep on doing that. So if I had an experience where people were coming to me and there was some growth in that conversation, that would make
interesting.
me happy.
So
that would be my idea of scale.
Like an education evangelist.
In a way,
you go about and talk about this. So maybe in the future we see you in more sort of a guru avatar, where you go around talking to people and inspiring them to look beyond their neighborhood and their city and look beyond the borders of India.
Well, or maybe Indian educationists themselves in doing different things in India. I guess that would also be a good outcome. So you asked me a really tough question. I'm going to ask you back, which is, what do you think the Indian government can do to improve the quality or the situation, educational situation?
I think the first thing, Kimberly, and honestly, it's a tough question. Anything that involves the government is tough, right? But I think the most important thing is to allow a little bit more autonomy and more freedom to the institutions themselves. And I think what really distinguishes the education system, for example, in the US, because each university that we think of as aspirational, Stanford, Harvard, Columbia, they are autonomous. They decide their own fees, their faculty salaries, their standards, everything. They're independent. And I think in India for a long time, institutions have been shackled in some sense. But it's changing because we are thinking about the new higher education regulatory system coming in. And I think what's really important is to also let foreign universities come to India. And that would shake up, because competition in any part of the economy eventually is good for the consumer. So if a typical year in a US college is what, like $50,000
Yeah,
a year,
yeah.
around that. Okay, and if that experience can be brought to India by Indian universities affiliating, collaborating with the best universities of the world, I think that same experience would be available at a much more affordable price to Indian students. So I think that's the next big leap for Indian education, is going out and doing these joint ventures, very active
Yes.
collaborations.
Yes.
And it's happened in other parts of the
Yes,
world,
definitely.
like China, for example.
Right.
And I'm sure, and all of them are interested to come to India because the next billion young
Yes.
people are in India.
Right.
And so I'm sure that's going to happen.
Yeah.
But as we know, with almost anything in India, it's a process. It's probably not as fast as we'd like it to be.
Yeah.
But I think that's the writing on the wall, and eventually we are going to get there. Having Kimberly Dixit on the show was very interesting for many reasons. I think she's a great example of an entrepreneur who's in the business because she's passionate about it. And the way she articulates her narrative about Red Pen is all about human contact. It's about helping people, finding meaningful solutions, creating awareness. And I think that's very refreshing to hear this language instead of talking about earning per share and scalability and what is the valuation of the company. And the other thing that was very interesting in her journey and understanding her story was the fact that with a very small budget, but large ambitions and goals, the Red Pen team have thought globally right from get-go. So they have now customers in different parts of the world. They have their affiliates and education counselors in other parts of the world. So in some sense, they have demonstrated that if you want to be global, you don't have to wait for 10 years or need a huge amount of funding to do that. You just need the right amount of attitude and the right amount of thinking. And I think as India grows, we need many, many more, maybe thousands and hundreds of thousands of new entrepreneurs like Kimberly to come in, who are entrepreneurs because they see a need in society and they are out there to fulfill that need. So she really represents this new breed of social entrepreneurs, and she's running this amazing social enterprise and really fulfilling a fantastic need for lakhs of students in India to think about an education future that is beyond the city or the state that they actually live in. So congratulations, Kimberly.
Thank
And
you.
thank you for being with
Thanks
us.
again.